There's this one story that has captivated people for centuries, the tragic tale of the Library of Alexandria. We think of it as this single, incredible collection of all ancient knowledge, just lost to history in a massive fire. It's a really powerful, almost romantic legend.
Yeah, the popular myth paints this incredibly dramatic picture, right? One catastrophic fire that just single-handedly throws the world into a dark age, destroying countless secrets of philosophy, science, and literature. It's a story we all feel like we know. But what if that story, the one we all know about a single world-changing inferno, isn't the whole truth? What if the real story is way more complex, and in some ways, maybe even more tragic? Okay, let's really get into this.
Before we can even start to solve the mystery of the library's death, we have to understand its life. I mean, what was this legendary place really?
So first thing, it wasn't just a library. It was actually part of a much larger research institution called the Museon, which means a shrine of the muses. Think of it like the ancient world's version of a modern university or a think tank, complete with lecture halls, beautiful gardens, even observatories. In fact, our modern word museum comes directly from this ancient center of learning. And the sheer scale of its collection, it's just staggering. At its absolute peak, scholars figure the library held up to 700,000 papyrus scrolls. That's not just a collection, that was a full-on attempt to gather all of human knowledge under one roof. Just incredible.
So how did they get all those scrolls? Well, let's just say their methods were pretty aggressive. Any ship that docked in Alexandria's harbor was searched. If they found a book, boom, it was confiscated. The library staff would then make a copy, give the copy back to the owner, and keep the precious original for their own collection. Can you even imagine that happening today?
But look, this wasn't just about hoarding scrolls. This was a buzzing intellectual hub. One of its most famous scholars, a guy named Callimachus, had this really clear philosophy, summed up by his famous quote, "A big book is a big bore." He was all about concise, elegant writing, not these huge, sprawling epics, and he totally shaped the literary tastes of his time. And this is where their ambition just goes off the charts. Callimachus created this famous catalog called the Pinakies. But here's the wild part. It wasn't a list of the books the library had. It was a huge bibliographic survey of all known Greek literature, period, whether they owned it or not. Their goal wasn't just to own knowledge, but to map the entire universe of it. Okay, so if this place was so monumental, so important, who or what destroyed it? Over the centuries, a few key suspects have been blamed, turning this into one of history's greatest whodunits. Let's open up the case file.
Our first and definitely most famous suspect is the Roman general Julius Caesar. The story of him burning the library is probably the version you've heard a dozen times.
So what really went down in 48 BCE? Well, Caesar himself wrote that he set fire to ships in the harbor while he was under siege. Other ancient writers confirm that, yeah, the fire spread and caused some damage on land. It most likely destroyed a warehouse near the docks that was full of scrolls, maybe tens of thousands of them. A tragic loss? Absolutely. But not a single ancient source claims it destroyed the entire Mausoleum or the main library itself. It was basically collateral damage, not some deliberate act of cultural destruction. All right, let's move on to our next suspect. Centuries later, a new group gets the blame. Zealous Christians, supposedly eager to destroy all the pagan knowledge of the past. The key event people point to here happened in 391 CE. A Christian mob did, in fact, destroy a magnificent pagan temple in Alexandria called the Serapeum. Now, some much later stories claim this temple had a daughter library. The problem is, contemporary accounts of the temple's destruction don't mention a library at all. So, While the destruction of the temple was a very real and violent event, the idea that a huge collection of scrolls went up in flames with it seems to be a dramatic detail added to the story much, much later. And that brings us to our final suspect from the Arab conquest of Egypt in 642 CE. The story here is that the Caliph Omar ordered all the library scrolls to be used as fuel to heat the city's bathhouses. It is a heck of a story, but historians have a huge problem with it. The story doesn't show up anywhere until centuries after it was supposed to have happened. Contemporary sources from that time, both Christian and Muslim, are completely silent about the destruction of any great library. Because of that, this account is pretty widely considered to be a much later invention. So, if it wasn't Caesar or the Christians or the Arabs in one big dramatic event, what really happened? Well, the truth is less cinematic, but it's a lot more telling. The real culprit was just a slow, creeping decay over hundreds of years. Let's just walk through this timeline. The decline started way back in 1450 BCE, when a king kicked out a bunch of foreign scholars for political reasons. Then, under Roman rule, the generous royal funding that built the library in the first place started to dry up. The city's focus just shifted. Fast forward to the 270s CE, and the whole palace district where the library was located got heavily damaged during warfare. See, there was no single fire. It was a death by 1,000 cuts. Budget cuts, neglect, political turmoil, and just changing priorities. So, the crucial point is this. The Great Library of Alexandria wasn't murdered in some single fiery attack. It was just left to die, slowly. Its greatest enemy wasn't a torch, but the slow creep of human indifference and neglect. But this story doesn't just end in ashes and dust. It actually ends with a powerful idea, one that proved pretty much impossible to extinguish. And this, right here, is the key takeaway. The physical scrolls might have turned to dust and the buildings might have crumbled, but the idea of a universal library, a single place to house all the world's knowledge and make it accessible, that idea was way more durable than stone or papyrus. This powerful concept directly inspired its modern successor. When architects were competing to design the new Library of Alexandria, the winning design was this massive circle, a tilted disc that looks like it's rising out of the earth. And as the jury chairman said, that shape was chosen on purpose to symbolize continuity, a connection between the ancient past and our digital future. Opened back in 2002, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina is this stunning, modern tribute to its ancient namesake. It's so much more than just a library. It's a whole cultural complex designed to be a beacon of learning for the 21st century. And, most importantly, it has a digital assets repository, which is trying to tackle the modern challenge of preserving knowledge not on scrolls, but on servers. Which leaves us with a pretty big final thought. The scholars of Alexandria tried so hard to preserve their entire world of knowledge on papyrus scrolls. Today, we create more information in a single day than they collected in a century. It really makes you wonder, 2,000 years from now, what parts of our digital world will have survived, and what parts will have been lost to the modern equivalent of simple indifference?